So good morning, everyone. And this morning we're going to be talking about relationships. And I do want to include, the relationships that we have. I hear that it's actually a big struggle for a lot of people right now is how we are relating to one another. And I also read a report that following the pandemic in China, the divorce rate went up considerably. So I thought we better hop on that topic and give you some tips and tools. And then I also hear that some of you are really struggling with the relationship that you have with yourself. And we can, you may be in that place where you are very kind to other people, but to yourself, not so much. So we are going to be applying the same tools that I'm going to be talking about for, romantic relationships, friendship relationships, but you can also use them with yourself, which is very useful, right? Because that is actually the one relationship that we really don't put enough time into, I think. So we'll be looking at that, but let's start off with a quick alignment. Let's get into a place where we can be aligned and ready. So let's start by taking in a really deep breath. And as you do, just breathing out. Imagine your feet on the floor. If they're on the floor, feel them on the floor. And just imagine roots going down into the earth, really grounding you, really connecting you. So as I say, the energy frequencies are changing and we're open to more and more energies now than I think we have been before. And staying grounded is really important so that you can really connect and bring your light to this planet. And we do desperately need it right now. So feel that connection with Mother Earth and then be aware of the light from the highest source coming in through the top of your head, flowing through your body and just aligning you. And then on the highest of levels, we connect now as a circle of light, as a wheel of light, through a golden strand of light that now comes in and connects with your heart center, going up to the highest level so that each one of our heart centers is open and connected. And the intention is for us to release that which no longer serves us, and to really step into our full potential. So at this highest levels, as we're connected as a wheel of light, let us just be aware of that connection and just send love to the right of you, love out to the left of you, love before you, love behind you, love beneath you, love above you. And then feel that feel that love coming into your heart right now. Filling it and opening it. Good. Okay, heart centers opened. Let's take in a breath and come back with your hearts opened and aligned now. So we're going to be talking about relationships today. And I like to start from a place of, how many of you are actually in a romantic relationship right now? Let's just see a show of hands. Okay. Okay, so a few of you. And how's it going? How's it going? Okay, so for some of you it's going okay, good. I'm seeing some nods, that's great news. And for those of you who aren't in a relationship, how is your relationship going with yourself? And even those of you that are in a relationship, how is the relationship going with yourself? Some people are saying good, some people are like, oh, I don't know, really. I'm getting this. In Portuguese, we have an expression which is mais ou menos, which means kind of more or less. And I'm seeing a lot of this happening. Okay, so that gives me an idea of what you're struggling with then. And of course, when we're in relationship with other people, it is also a relationship with ourselves, right? And I think, you know, one of the things I've seen over the years is that people who are in romantic relationships, when we first meet that significant other, it's like, it's all so exciting, isn't it? And you're in this place of love and everything's fantastic. And suddenly you start to see yourself through the eyes of love. And oh my goodness, aren't you wonderful? And aren't you lit up? And then we get attached to that other person. And suddenly it's like, I need you around me for me to feel quite so wonderful, right? So when we don't have that love that's reflected back to us. But really being in that place of love actually gives us permission to be more in love with ourselves. And so I think that's often where, you know, I see a lot of people hitting into really sticky territory, right? Because when we're dependent on that person outside of us, for us to be able to feel that love within us, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. And then all of those subconscious, you know, programs and patterns and recovery strategies start to come in, right? We start to go, oh my goodness, how can I be more attractive? Or how can I be more engaging? Or how can I be more intelligent? And it starts to hit upon our not good enough stuff, right? And then we beat ourselves up mercilessly for not being enough for an ideal that we've set up in our own heads. Does this sound a little bit nuts to you? Anybody else kind of getting this like, oh, this is a crazy ride we're on, right? So how do we, one, come back to ourselves and be able to feel that place of love within us, right? That we do get from the other person. And we do get reflected back to us in all of our relationships, right? Relationships just aren't romantic. They're also, you know, we have your relationship with your family, your relationship with your siblings, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your colleagues. So relationships go all over the place. And depending on how a person will reflect us back is usually how we're feeling about that relationship. Right? I once worked with this lady in LA, and bless her heart, she came to me and she had not spoken to her husband in 2 years. They lived in the same house. How they managed it, I've no idea. They had 2 children. And of course, she came to see me because she was really depressed. And I was like, well, I think we probably need to sort your relationship out a little bit because, you know, as I say, depression is about grief. Now, what was she in grief about? Well, she was in grief about her relationship. Her children were at college. So her whole emphasis for keeping the relationship together had been for her children, right? So she'd lost that one's gone. And here she is living in this house with a man she's decided she doesn't like and didn't speak to for 2 years. When I asked her, so what happened 2 years ago? She went, oh, well, we had an argument. And I said, well, what was it about? She could not tell me. She just held this resentment. And she, of course, had a list of justifications of resentment, right? About her husband. And she just held it in place and said, well, why don't you get divorced? Sounds like a logical question, right? Why are you still with this person? And she said she was with him because of financial reasons. So, okay, we need to go back up. Now, she was the only one. Her husband didn't speak to her, so he didn't want to work on the relationship. But with only one person, you can change a relationship. Did you know that? In changing the relationship with yourself. So what you do on the inside directly affects the people around you. How you think, how you interact, how you think about them makes a difference. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit, and I want to give you some tools around that. But first, let's start. So, you know, traditionally, if you go to see somebody to work on your relationship, they'll usually start with what's wrong. And I think that's actually the wrong place to start, right? I like to start with what's right? What's the potential here? So if you've got a piece of paper with you, then what I recommend is you just jot down, what is the potential for your relationship with your partner, like whoever comes up in your mind when I say the word relationship. So if you're not in a relationship with another, then I would go for talking about this about yourself. How would you rate? And what's the potential of the relationship with yourself and with your significant other? So let's just give you a few moments to jot down some ideas about that. Okay, and then I'd love to hear from a couple of you. Who wants to share? What's your relationship? So you can just go down to the bottom left and click that little microphone. It should say unmute. It should be showing you mute, or just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Morning, Heather.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm good, just
Good.
at work.
Okay, so let's hear your potential quickly then while you're at work.
Potential with myself and my relationship, just acceptance,
Okay.
adventure, security and safety, and unconditional love.
Okay, brilliant. And that's for both of your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And if you were in that place of accepting and, you know, being in that space, what would your potential of your relationship be? What do you think is possible if you're accepting and you're in that place?
Really infinite joy and love and freedom, lightness, a sense of lightness.
Brilliant. So that becomes like your potential, that lightness, that love, that fullness, right? So that is going to be the vibration that you're going to hold as we're talking about this. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Who else would like to share theirs? Anybody else? Okay. So you've got your potential of your relationship in your current relationship or your relationship with your significant other. Now, this is a vibrational frequency. So my next question is, if this is the potential of your relationship, what actions are you taking that is in alignment with that? So what actions do you take that's in alignment with that? Or could you take? And let's just come up with maybe 2 or 3 of them. What actions can you take? And one of the actions may be to really hold that vibration for yourself. And for your partner. So now that we have an idea of where it is we're going and what it is we're wanting, I do want to bring up some of the pitfalls that can happen, right? So some of the pitfalls that can happen are usually in conversation, right? So in our conversation, either with ourselves or with other people. When we have, and I want to talk just about one linguistic pattern this morning, and there are several, but one of the linguistic patterns to really watch out for is you always, right? You always, you never, anything that begins with you and something inflammatory comes after it, you're in trouble. Unless, of course, you want an argument, either with yourself or with your significant other or with some other relationship, right? But when you're saying you always and you never to somebody else, you will guarantee some kind of argument. Because look, they either have to agree with you and admit they're not enough, or they have to placate and give up their own power to fit into the relationship with you, right? And we don't want either of those options. If you're in a relationship with someone, you want them to be the best version of themselves, right? That's why you met in the beginning. That's the love that Heather was talking about. That is the potential to have that love and to have that depth. So you want to avoid linguistic patterns that cause that explosion. And if you're starting with you, blah, 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 that is almost guaranteed to cause some kind of upset. So pay attention. When are you saying that with yourself as well, right? So are you saying to yourself, you always screw it up, or you're never going to find a partner, or there aren't any good partners there, or you aren't enough to have a relationship? Whatever it is, I want you to catch some of those linguistic patterns and start to just change them. And here's a question to ask. I always? I never do that, right? So whatever it is you're saying, turn it round so that it's a question, because what you'll start to find when you do that is your brain will start to come up with examples of a different experience, of times where you maybe haven't done that, or times where you've had different resources. Okay? So let's go back to that lady, right? The woman who came in because she was depressed. So what did I do with her? Well, first was to get her to a place where she could forgive her husband and forgive herself. Like, she couldn't even remember what it was she was upset about. Imagine that. Imagine holding that, being upset with someone, going to the whole point of not speaking to them for 2 years, living in the same house. Can you imagine how uncomfortable that is? Can you imagine how difficult that would have been for her? So one was forgiveness. Forgive herself and forgive her partner, right? And then to look at, well, what did she really want? She wanted a loving relationship. She thought she had to get a different one in order to have it, right? But once we start to focus on what it is we're wanting, then the details can kind of fit in. Now, in relationship manifestation, I hear people say, it should be like this, it should be like that. You know, they have all these lists of rules, and it needs to be this person. Now, if that love, like we go back to this client, all of the things she wanted potentially were in the relationship she had, but some things needed fixing, some patterns needed addressing. So in the forgiveness of herself, and I really encourage you right now to just know that you've been doing the very best you can with what you have, okay? You've done the best you can with what you've had. All of us are programmed. All of us are programmed by our early childhood years. And then that just gets repeated and repeated and repeated. So right now you can just forgive yourself for that. And then you may want to forgive the other. Now, one of the ways that I think is really useful with forgiveness, and maybe this should be our whole topic next week, I'm thinking, but forgiveness is about acknowledging that the person didn't have the resources or the tools that they needed to do anything differently. Otherwise, they would have done, right? So here we kind of hold this space of people are doing the very best they can with what they have, right? And once they have something different, they can do something different. And the same applies to you. So you can acknowledge that in other people, but can you also acknowledge that within yourself? Good. So once we got through forgiveness, we start to come back to that original setting of what is the intention? What is the space that you're holding? What's the space you're holding? Right? And by that, I mean, when you're thinking about your partner or your relationship with yourself or whoever you're looking at right now, you can see the potential, but are your thoughts aligned with that potential? So here I'll tell you about another client that I worked with a few years ago now. She was a mother of a boy, he was a man, he was in his 30s, who was an alcoholic, and he'd been that way since about the age of 12. He had been in trouble with the law. He'd been in and out of jail. He couldn't hold down a job. And his mum had kind of reached the end of her tether with him. And the final straw was he and another girl had just got pregnant and they were both addicts, right? So it's a situation that we look at and we go, oh my God, this is a disaster, right? And so as I was listening to her talk, I was thinking, he doesn't have any other energy. There's nobody else, like his friends. He was an addict, his friends were addicts, his family held him in a place where he was an addict, right? So society held him as an addict. And I suddenly saw there was no light coming to him to be able to make any other choices, right? So when we're talking about holding space, what we're doing is we're holding the vibrational frequency of that potential. And so I asked her, what do you think his potential is? What do you think he might look like or be like if he was clean and sober? And she had to think for a minute because she'd never seen him like that. And finally, you know, with a little bit of coaching, she saw that image of him. She saw him sober and she described it to me. And I said, well, let's just do an experiment, right? Let's have some fun with it. Let's do an experiment and let's just hold a space for him. Let's just hold that vision. So every time she thought about him sober. Every time I thought about him, I also did the same. Now, why was this so significant? This is so significant because he didn't, up until that point, acknowledge he had a problem. Within 10 days of us holding space, he had checked himself into rehab and began his journey to sobriety. Now, that's amazing. We could say, well, it's a coincidence. I have seen so many things over the years about holding space for another person and watching them step into their potential. So we go back to this client of mine in LA who was living with this husband, right? And so I started to teach her, like, what's the potential of the relationship? And then what space would you need to hold for your husband in order to have that potential met? And she saw it. It was when they went back to the beginning. It was what they had at the very start of their relationship. So as she started to hold that, the next week she came in with a smile on her face. He had approached her. She didn't even have to approach him. He'd approached her and said, look, this has been going on for long enough. I think we need to have a conversation, right? Now, she was gobsmacked because all she'd done was in her mind, right? So she'd started to create right thought and right energy for the relationship. So as you think about that, as you think about you holding space for you holding space for your partner, you holding space for your children, it really is remarkable. It really is remarkable. So if this is about you, and I think it should be about you, even if you are in a relationship, if this is about you, what is the space that you can hold now for yourself? What's your potential? What is you living in that state of being in love? Because that's when magic starts to happen, right? That's when we start to see things really take off and really shine. Okay, any thoughts or questions? Heather, I noticed you've got your hand raised. Did you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Question.
I was going to tell you that this really does work, holding space. And you gave me a really cool tool once. You said, next time your brother calls, because he was in a really dark spot, I want you to say, David, I love you. David, I love you. And I started just approaching him from this really loving place and just answered with such positivity. And then I forgot that I had been doing that. And he calls me one day. I pick up the phone. I go, hi. He goes, Heather, I love you. Heather, I love you. Like, oh my gosh, it's working. So
that's brilliant.
And thank you for all of this.
Yeah. Good job, Heather. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, anybody else got any questions or thoughts or how to apply this? Is everybody clear? Give it another minute. If you have a question, if you have a burning desire, now's the time. Okay, so I am at the point now where, so first of all, let's finish this. So do your relationship stuff this week, really focus on it, really pay attention. When you find you go off track, you may be complaining or criticizing inside your head, just stop. Like, I like to see a stop sign and stop. And then think, am I holding this potential? Am my thoughts, my actions, and my reality in alignment with the potential of the relationship or not? Okay, if not, stop and reassess and start to bring in some new thoughts. So having said that, so next week I'm thinking we're going to talk about forgiveness, because I think that's a huge one, and that can be one of the most powerful healing tools I've found. So we're going to talk about forgiveness. And I'm kind of at the point with this that I'm thinking we will continue maybe in a slightly different way. So, you know, we may go down to once a month. I'm not sure yet. I'd love to hear from you. What would you like? What do you need? You know, so let me know. Let me know thoughts. Let me know questions. I'm opening it up next week for questions. And yeah. Okay, I hope you have a fabulous week. I'm so grateful to you all for joining us this morning and us all having this time to come together and really set that intention for our week, for ourselves, for our relationships, and for, of course, the planet. So thank you all. Hope you'll join me next week, and we'll see where we go from here. I'm excited. All right, have a beautiful week. Thank you all.